Welcome back to another episode of Recovery APN. Another episode where Andy and I are on opposite sides of the country.
What's up, Cheech? How we doing out there, huh?
You know, today in LA, surprisingly, it's a little rainy.
Oh, wow. You mean the 1 out of the 5 days a year when it rains out there?
Yeah, I was shocked myself. But listen, it's always a beautiful day here.
So listen, our producer has told us a couple times, don't speak about specific events because then the timing could be off, right? So we got explicit instructions. But that being said, the event I would like to quickly discuss is a timeless event. So I think I'll be the only one that really cares, but Michigan played Ohio State last week, and it was the game, as we say, and Michigan continues to assert their dominance over Ohio. And I just wanted to, for anyone out there that's going to listen, go blue, and we don't appreciate anything from the state of OH.
You know, it's funny, and I'm not going to harp on this because I know it upsets Keith, but I'm not even going to think about that game because that's how much hatred I have towards that state up north, right? Is that what they refer to it? That state up north. The amount of hatred I have towards them, I don't even want to give them any credit.
It's the biggest rivalry in all sports, and Michigan owns it for 2 straight years. So that's all we're going to say. Checkmate.
I love that I'm positioned as a hater on this podcast, when in reality, as a producer, I'm like, you guys know this doesn't age well, right?
Well, you know what? This game itself will age for the next 360 days, right?
Do the math, pal. Saturday till whatever today is.
Thursday, so 61 days.
Oh,
359.
Little fast math to kick off the pod. All right, let's get into it, boys.
When talking about the episode we have coming up, which is very unique to this podcast to date, where we had the ability to engage with some families of our alumni, you know, one being me, about their experience. And what I found in that conversation, and I knew, but it was like more cemented, was we talk about the individuals or the alumni that have come on and talked about, you know, their experience through all this and how long their journey was and how difficult that journey was for them. And it was. But I don't think we've ever harped on the fact of how difficult it was for the families to see and witness those alumni go through that journey or go through those situations. And I said it when I spoke to my mom, which will be coming up. But what I found to be what we talked about is, as hard as it was for me to go through that, I think and believe it was equally as hard for her to go through that as well.
No, I agree. And one of the I guess popular, I wouldn't say popular, but an opinion you might hear in recovery a lot of times is before people get sober, the comment, I was guilty of this, is saying, hey, this only affects me. Mind your business, mom. Mind your business, brother. And you don't realize how much time you're stealing, how much anxiety you are, putting on your loved ones' lives. They can't sleep. They can't be a mother to, so my brother's children his daughter's going to be 11 and his son's 9. And my parents, 9 years ago, they couldn't really experience their grandkids too much as when they were, I think Michael was 6 months and Ava was 2 when I got sober, but all my parents wanted to do was be grandma and grandpa, but they're worried about where I am. Am I going to die? Am I going to do, where am I stealing money from? Right? You rob your family of those precious moments. So then to hear it on the other side on, what it was like, and then also the gifts and what it's like now is, again, super, super monumental. It's super paramount to recovery for people. And I can't wait to hear Mama Brody here.
Yeah, you hit it spot on. And I think my mom talks specifically about that, and so does my sister, who's going to join too. But one thing I also wanted to touch on before we go to that is there are so many family members or friends, significant others, siblings, whatever it is, that are are dealing with someone that's struggling today or yesterday or going to be tomorrow that have never gone through such a thing. And my mom talked about it, and she said, like, I was brought up with a family. We were big drinkers. And so when this happened, like, I had no idea what to do, what to expect. And I think, and I said this, and I said, similar to an individual going, walking into the doors of AA or NA, they have the opportunity to ask for help and ask for support from individuals that have gone through a similar journey or experience. So I think what I was excited about for, talking to my mom, not only for selfishly my own reasons, but to give our listeners and their significant others or whomever is a family member or a friend that has someone struggling in life, some advice on what to do. Like my mom had, to give everyone an idea before we get into it, my mom has a husband, sorry, someone walked in, a husband and two sons and a daughter-in-law on recovery. So like, if you add all of it up, it's like 30, almost 40 years of recovery in her immediate family. Yeah. And so and her to get honest and vulnerable was like, I don't know, to me, I was just like, I wasn't shocked by a lot of the things she said, but I was like proud of her. And I will say, like, and I said it on the podcast, but I want it to be known, and I'll repeat it, is that during my journey, as much as, I needed to do it for myself and I needed to man up and get the support I needed, I didn't have, there was no bigger cheerleader for me than my mom. And I could not have be where I am today without her. And so I'm so appreciative of everything she did, whether or not I saw it then or not.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, usually whether it's, someone's, your wife, your mom, your dad, your husband, like that person that's sitting there and like watching it all is usually an angel. Right. But, one of the other common things that I want to bring up that's common, again, like when you talk to a mom or a dad or a husband or a wife, and they're trying to, how do I get my son or my daughter, or my, my partner to stop, stop drinking or stop using, or they need treatment. And we use the term surrender a lot in recovery, and a family has to surrender too, because the what you get all the time is the response of like, well, like, hey, if I just let Joey go, do what he wants, like, hey, he could die, and that's the truth. But the other side of it is that my mom, as we're talking about that, my mom just called, but as we're talking about. Yeah, why aren't you answering? But in the same breath, you have to, send Billy to treatment, you know what I mean? And for mom and dad or for a partner, that's very difficult to surrender the control of that. But it's like, hey, he's dying or she's dying under your roof. And again, like most moms and dads and partners don't have mental health and substance abuse. We don't learn about it in high school or in college, unless if you take specific classes, right? But so it's kind of like this unknown, and you're trying to fix it by like holding it close. And the closer you hold it, your loved one is going further and further away. So anyway, I'm excited to hear your mom and your sister.
Yeah, I'm excited for everyone to hear it too. So without further ado, everyone, please enjoy. Today, I'm joined by my mother, Debbie Brody.
Hello.
Filming today, a day after Thanksgiving in New Jersey. So I appreciate you taking some time and doing this.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, the best guest.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the goal of this episode or this mini series, whatever we want to call it, is to give especially listeners that may have a family member or a friend that is struggling with substance abuse and mental health, and to give them any level of support or guidance, because obviously we'll get into it, but you have a great deal of experience in having family members that have suffered with it, and it's as hard it is for the individual that's suffering, it's probably equally as hard for the family members.
Agreed.
So first question, what was your experience like as a mother knowing that I was struggling with drug addiction?
It was a very sad and trying time. It was a time where I would have liked to be in control of a situation, and I couldn't. I couldn't. No matter what I did, I could not control the situation. And so not only was I sad, but I walked around with extreme high anxiety over what could happen, what would happen. If I couldn't do it, who was going to do it? Who was going to do it? Not realizing that the only person that could do it is you. And I couldn't live with myself because I saw at the time that you just weren't ready to do that because you didn't see anything wrong with what was going on.
No, that's a fair point. And what's going through my head now, and to give the listeners, I guess, a bit more information about your background.
Okay.
Not like your husband is sober and has been in recovery for almost 20 years.
Correct.
You have another son who is in recovery and is sober for almost 4 years now. So I guess when dealing with me, or seeing me through my journey, especially in active addiction, what made you feel that you can control what I was doing versus what Greg or Dad was doing? Like, what was the difference there that you felt? That
I don't know how to answer that question. All I could tell you is that no matter how old your child is, I'll be a mother till the day I die, and my children have always been a lifeline and my world. And not that my husband isn't, but my husband is. I know he's very strong, and his situation, I think, was a little different than yours. I don't know. I mean, addiction is addiction, but just a different. And I felt very strongly. I learned a lot. From his. And one of the things I just wanted to interject with that is that when it happened with him, I knew nothing about addiction. I grew up my parents didn't drink. I never drank. I just don't have any kind of addictive personality except for candy, other than that. But when we went to a support group with my husband, and the woman, the leader of the group, said, look around this room, there's 25 of you in this room, and it's like a 10% chance that these people will, that won't relapse. And I turned around and I looked at Dad and I said, we're out of here. If this is the only chances we have is 10%. And the woman, the leader, then explained it that that's just worldwide. That's what it is. And only the strong are able to, it's a debilitating disease, and the strong survive. And that scared me to death. It scared me to death. And I lived with that for a long time. And then I watched Dad get stronger and stronger. And he was like a model. I don't want to call him a patient, but he was a model patient. He did all the right things. He did what he was supposed to do. He knew he had a family to take care of, and we just moved along with it. And as a family, we came together. We didn't hide anything from anybody. We discussed it, but it was very trying. But I knew that in my heart, I knew that everything was going to be okay.
No, it's interesting that you bring up we weren't trying to hide anything, because I'll use myself as an example. I think there's a certain stigma that goes along with saying you're an alcoholic or a drug addict. And for whatever reason, I like put that in my brain, right? Like I said, there is a stigma, and I think a lot of people do. But I never thought about it, but when I think back to Dad in early recovery, like he never cared about a stigma. Like he was almost like proud to be like, yeah, I don't drink, and like announce it to the world. And I remember you telling me stories like he'd go out for dinner or do these things, and like, you know, he'd raise his hand and like be proud that he was in recovery. But I think that that's almost like tackling a stigma that needs to be tackled, right? Like he's on the front lines talking about it, and you know, you bringing that up just like kind of reminded me, whether if we were going out to like dinners with other families, like he was the first to be like, yep, I don't drink, I'll have a Diet Coke. And I think that like you need trailblazers like that.
But I also think that that's where you find who your real family is, your real friends are. There were people that had plenty of things to say that he just didn't care. And those are the people that he
Associate himself with.
Disassociated with. And that was another thing. When in this group, this woman said, and you'll have to find all new friends. And I turned around and I looked at him. I go, I have to find new friends too, because I was like, what do you mean? So that, I didn't understand it. I really was very naive in it. But clearly over 20 years, I've gotten to really understand it. And I deal with it the best I can. I can't tell you that I always do the right thing with it, but I try my very best, and I'm sure you'll disagree with certain things, but I try my very best to be there and be cognizant of the things that I am doing wrong when it comes to dealing with family members in this situation.
I'm trying to think, and like you said, like I could find somebody to disagree. And I think you've always been supportive in terms of like our journeys and our recovery. I think sometimes, like you said earlier, it's a little bit different when you can't control it. I think sometimes maybe you get frustrated or anxious about it, but I don't think you're necessarily doing something out of spite, right? No. And I think that like, or on purpose, I think any action you make is always like endearing, and you because you think it's going to help, right?
I want to put everything back into, I want to make sure everything's back to where they're supposed to be. And although I know that that's just not the way life is, and I try to make an example by saying, I don't need life up here. I don't need life down here. I kind of would like to kind of float down the middle. And I know life has its ups and downs, but I don't really want the straight line, but I kind of would like it, not as many waves, because I've had my share of waves, and I don't like them so much.
Yeah,
I don't like them so much.
So what was it like for you to finally see me surrender and get the help I needed?
It was a breath of fresh air for me. I took a breath. I was able to say, thank you, God, and just say, because I remember Daddy used to say, it has to be, he's got to make this decision on his own. He's got to do it. And I was saying, I could make him do it. I could make him do it. And I couldn't. And I just want to share something because I don't even know if we've ever discussed this, but in your podcast, you said that your surrender more or less was when you were in the hospital and you were there by yourself. And I just want to give you a little bit background on that because, I came with you to the hospital first when they told me everything was going to be okay. I looked at Daddy and I said to him, we're out of here. I was so angry. I was so angry that I didn't even, and that's so not like me because I would only want to be there for my children, but I was so angry. All I wanted to do was get out. So me being angry and taking advantage of that situation allowed you to see a little different me because I wasn't sitting there and saying, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Let's do it this way. Let's do it. I just left you there with your own. And to this day, I can almost cry about it because I say to myself, it was an unplanned thing, but God took care of that situation for me and allowed you to be able to have your deep feelings and your thinking and without anybody there.
Yeah, and it's good to know. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think when it comes to like that situation, and as I explained before, it's like everyone talks about like their bottoms, right? And it's like sometimes for most people in like recovery, there's a bottom that's going to make it like you're gonna have to decide what change you're gonna make. Am I going to continue going down this path, or am I going to, make a change for the better? And I don't know, like obviously I talked about it on my episode, but I think throughout my life, I took for granted a lot of support. And again, like in active addiction, right? A lot of it, it's all like super selfish, right? Everything's about me. And I felt that like my actions didn't have consequences. And I felt that being there alone was finally like okay, like it does have a consequence. Like my family is like, all right, not that they moved on, but almost is like, okay, like now it's on you to figure it out. So like indirectly, yes, I think it like, who knows what would have happened if you were to have come and stayed. But yeah, I would say like, you know, you indirectly making that decision had a big impact on me for sure.
Yeah.
So as we're filming this, I believe today's what? The 25th. I believe I celebrate 18 months of sobriety in like 2 days. So I guess, what is it like for you to see me like over the last 18 months?
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't get to physically see you as much as I would like to, because you are on the West Coast, and by the time we're FaceTiming, I'm already in my pajamas and whatever. But I am, I couldn't be more proud. First of all, I couldn't be more proud. I feel like you found something that you love and you're passionate about. And I've always said this to you, is you must find your passion, because if you're going to get up every single day and go to work, you should be happy at what you're doing. And if you're not, you're going to be miserable. And I lived that with Daddy, and now he's the happiest man alive. So it's so important to be, get up happy, go to bed happy, and wake up happy, because the stress and the anxiety in life, that life is dealing us with all the crap that's going on right now, you have to be able to put yourself in a situation where happiness has got to be a top tier thing.
Yeah, I would say to that, and like I've said it on my podcast, I think throughout my life, there was always like, I'd wake up for like artificial happiness. So whether it was going to work just to make as much money, or sell a software I didn't really care about, or go to a dinner or a club, or to buy this or that just to say like I need it, and like just to make me like happy for 24 hours or 2 hours, whatever it was. I think that was, you know, like I was doing that for a long period of time when I was using. And I think today, you know, I always talk about like today, I always put like my recovery first, and I always like thank God that like, you know, I've stayed sober for the last 24 hours. But also to be able to help others in their journey has been a big passion for mine. And it's not necessarily telling them what to do. You know, it's in AA, they say like attraction rather than promotion. So it's like for me to get up and be a good member of the AA society and do the next best thing and live an honest and sober life is the best thing I could do for myself, for my job, and for like the community. So I would say that.
And I might add that it's not just me that's proud. Your entire family sees such a huge difference, and sees such I call it like the old Daniel. That's what we've been missing for a while, and now we have our old Daniel back.
So leading into family, how would you describe our family dynamic before treatment and since I've been in recovery? So let's call it
before treatment. Clearly was very stressful. Whether it was you wanting to take my car or Dad's car, and I used to shake every time you asked me, and I would say, it could have been 2:00 in the morning. I'll take you, I'll drive you, I'll go, just because I didn't want you in my car. Or just, it was very stressful. It was very, very stressful. And, you know, I still believe my sleeping issues started with all that, but it was very stressful. But now I feel that, especially like after you call me usually when you're on your way home from work, and we have a nice little conversation, and when I hang up, my heart is full. My heart is full, and I'm so happy that you're so happy, and I'm happy that you're doing well, and I'm happy that we can just hold a conversation. I don't have to look through it to see if there's any lying or there's any, because usually I can pinpoint something like that, but I just feel like it's very light and nice.
So, kind of going back to some of the family dynamic.
Oh, I didn't discuss that, I guess.
No, it's fine. It's fine. When I was at APN, we did a level of family therapy. And so I guess I want to hear from your perspective what your experience was like with working with APN's family service team.
It changed my life. Lori changed my life. And she changed my life because she was able to say to me, which no one has ever said to me before, I know exactly what you're going through. I went through it. I still go through it with my daughter. Some days are just going to be great, and sometimes it just won't be. But I'm telling you, you're not in this alone. You're not the only one. And she explained it in a way where I used to come off those phone calls. Of course, I was the only one crying during those phone calls, but I got off them and I felt so relieved. I felt relieved that you were in a place where they were taking care of you, because that was most important to me. And just that they had people like Lori there, and she just looked you in the eye. Although we were on Zoom, she looked me in the eye. She explained things. She was able to facilitate a conversation that got us talking. And I don't know that you were so ready to be open at that point. You were listening, but I don't know that you were voicing your opinion at that point. But she got us all to be able to say what we wanted to say to you, because everybody had a lot of things that they wanted to say, and that up until then were afraid of saying it because it was so volatile. And I think that, again, it changed my life.
Yeah, I think, so like two things on that note. I think number one, and it's like there's unique parallels to like Lori having the experience, firsthand experience, and you almost like hearing her talk about it. She could have had a doctorate. She could have just been another Jewish mother. She could have been a professor. But all you really wanted was to like hear from someone that went through it themselves and can provide real life experience.
That's exactly right.
And I think she provided that, similar to like someone in AA, right? That when you're talking to them, you don't want to hear about a textbook answer about this is the percentages, you should go here, here, and here and do this. Well, it's like, in my experience, this is what works for me because we have similar backgrounds, and based off my experience, I suggest you do this.
This is what I ran into also, because no matter who I spoke to, they'd say, oh, you need to get involved with Narconon, you have to do this. So I went on several groups, and I found
Al-Anon.
No, this was in Narconon. And I found this group in New Hampshire where there was like 5 ladies there. And I used to sit there and listen, because I really didn't, at that point, I didn't have as much to share. And I used to listen to them, and it was dire. It was dire. I used to get off. I used to go tell Daddy, I'm more depressed now than I ever was, listening to these people who have been, it's been a terrible road for them, and I wasn't learning from them. They were saying, well, let's read this passage, let's read that passage, and that doesn't work for me. I need to be able to feel it. I need to be able to hear somebody say to me as a parent. It was hard for me to put myself in a position to offer any kind of, and I don't want to say advice, but to share any kind of information about your situation, because I didn't know enough about it to discuss it, and I didn't feel like I was getting anything from these ladies, because it wasn't that kind of a discussion. It's not like we said, oh, this is what happened. We were just reading, and I was lost. I was lost. And I think I told you about it, and I had to stop listening. And then once these podcasts started, I'm getting more out of the podcast because I'm understanding the minds. I'm understanding the mind of people who struggle with it. And they explain it in a certain way where now I can understand that. And I hear it, and I agree with it. I agree, and I hear what they're saying. And that's made a huge difference for me, especially after listening, obviously, to yours. I mean, there's a lot of things, obviously, that most of it I knew, but there's some of it I didn't know, and I appreciated it. I appreciated it.
Yeah, well, so that was going to be my next question to you.
Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. Sorry, jumped ahead.
I guess from your perspective, what is your experience like seeing me, I guess, first question, like from my episode specifically, and then 2 of just the entire podcast?
I think that it makes me, first of all, it makes me very happy watching you and Andy. I think you have a nice little chemistry going. I think it makes me laugh. I find things that are quite comical. But I also see that although you're both not medical professionals by any means, but the way you share and the way that you're able to discuss with your guests, you bring out a little bit of, they're able to discuss their intimacies of their trauma or their addiction on a level that is not too deep, that if I'm listening as a listener, I don't want to cringe and be worried about I'm hearing too much. But it's been done so, I think, professionally that I come out of it saying, either most times I'm saying, oh my God, I feel terrible for this person, but look at this, look how strong they're becoming. And it's so nice to see that they're so happy with the help that they've received. But I think you guys are doing a wonderful job, and not just because you're my child, because I'm truly enjoying it, and I've turned it on to several different people. So any of the new downloads, that's all on me.
No, I guess in APN's perspective and what I've noticed being a client and an employee, we tend to try to do things cutting edge, whether it be with like in treatment or whether it be with certain types of modalities or types of equipment we use, but also like at its simplest form, you like rolling out a podcast to share stories about our alumni and give them the strength to use the platform to help others listening. So I do think that overall we do our best, and I think you're right. Like I'm very similar, and I have this in my recovery, like in my sobriety. As much as like I read the big book and I do all that, I think a big piece of my sobriety was talking to others, sharing my experience, relating to others, not knowing that like I wasn't the only one going through it. It's like, oh, you were doing that too. Oh, you were that selfish. Oh, but whatever it was. And it makes me feel like a part of and not alone. And not only do you feel part of, but you get to ask for their solution too. So, oh, you were doing that as well? And how did you stop? Well, I stopped this and this. And then my brain goes to a point where it's like, well, he was doing the same thing and he was able to stop because of doing this. Maybe it'll work for me, versus me taking like my brain and going to the drawing board by myself, which usually doesn't end in the right solution.
Correct. And that's why, again, it's just going back to like the Lori situation. If she hadn't said to me, I know exactly what you're feeling because I dealt with the exact same thing, it may not have been as helpful for me.
Yeah, I get it.
It just might not have been until I found, because I've talked to psychologists before, and unless you've lived it, it's hard for somebody that wants something, that wants to understand it. It's unless you lived it. It's just I just can't grab onto it.
No, I can relate, because throughout the last 35 years of my life, I think I've worked with a lot of different therapists, give or take. And I think the only 2 that I was able to connect with was Dustin at APN and my current therapist now in LA. And I think one of the big reasons, and I was willing, I was more willing, I think, more recently than I ever was. But I think knowing that they had something that I wanted and went through similar experiences that I did, so meaning that they're both in recovery, they both had their experience in drug addiction or alcoholism, and they've have, significant years in sobriety now and have turned to be, helping individuals, whatever it is, that they had something that was very attractive to me and had, we're both drug addicts or alcoholics, gave me, it allowed me to open up more and be myself and like be more willing, because like it was almost like a respect factor in my head. Like, okay, I get it. Like you've gone through like what I've gone through. So like versus sitting across the table or sitting across the couch from a therapist and them like bringing out a textbook and saying, well, like most alcoholics do this, this, and this. I've never experienced, but I can almost guess what you're doing. Like you don't know what I've gone through.
Not even that, but I think that also, I don't want to mention any names, but one that I truly adore and has always been helpful to me in my life, went more for the how come, not necessarily what to do in the, was looking to dig into in the beginning and not really try to understand what actually was happening. And again, I adore her and I think the world of her, but she wasn't right for you. She wasn't right for you. And the good part about it was she knew our family history, but the bad part about it is she knew our family history. It should have been just you. It should have been yours.
Yeah, listen, I think everyone is different, and I think she helped certain people in the family, and I think as much as I wouldn't say she didn't help me, but I don't think she was where I was in life. I needed, in my perspective, like I needed to like almost sit across from someone and like have a level of respect and like me, like, because I don't know, I feel like when I work with Dustin at APN and like who I work with now, like my ego goes away and it's more like respect. And I think sometimes when I worked with other therapists where like they didn't know, I thought that they didn't know what I was going through, so it was always like my ego took in the way, instead of like, hey, like be open and willing. It was like my ego, like you don't know what I'm going through, you don't get it, like no one knows me like myself. So I wasn't willing. But I guess the last question I had, and I think this is very important, kind of like one of the reasons why I think this could be so powerful, is, what would your advice be to individuals that have a loved one who is struggling with, whether it be alcoholism or substance abuse or mental health?
The only advice I could offer is you just love your loved one the most you can, and you do the best that you can, because you're not in control of it. You're not in control of it, and the only way they're going to get better is if they choose to do something with it. And it's so hard, and I remember not wanting to hear that, because I really thought I can do it. You cannot do it. You cannot do it unless that person is willing to do it. And once that person is willing, the road opens up. The road just opens up. It's not like a skinny little path anymore. Now it's a wide open highway, and they're able to go on. It sounds silly.
No.
Now they go on their journey, because I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. There was, no matter what I said or did, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. And that took me a very long time to understand that. Very long time. Because again, I like things in certain order, and I'm a controlling person, and I would like to tell people, if you sit on it, you watch them, and you babysit, you can do it. You can't do it. You can't. They have to want to do it.
Yeah, I think it's the same for the individual itself too. I think sometimes their ego gets in the way and says, if I go see a therapist, if I go do this, I'll be able to stop. It's like they don't realize at the bare minimum, it's at the bare bottom, it's you need to want this for yourself, because I can imagine there's so many times where I felt guilty because of all the help and support I was getting and wanting to do it for other people. And then what that only causes resentments. There's been there's so many people out there that I'm going to get sober for my mother, my wife, my kids, because I don't have a good relationship with them. But you have to want to make yourself better to improve the other relationships. And if you can't make yourself better first, in my eyes, and again, I'm sure it's helped other people, but I think it only creates more levels of resentment, because it's like, well, I'm doing it for you and you don't appreciate it, right? And so I think it's just very similar, just like in two outcomes. And I think once everyone can accept that, and it's hard. It's
very hard. It's because you have to get over the lying.
Yeah,
the lying. You got to get through the lying and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you need to get through.
Yeah.
And I think, and it's a journey for both parties. So at the end of the day, I commend you for sticking by my side. I couldn't have done it without you. And moving forward, I can't go on this journey without you and your support. And I understand that each day that I wake up, I make that decision to stay sober. Correct. I make the decision to do the right things. I make decisions not to lie, cheat, steal, whatever the cliches are. But it doesn't go without saying that support is always, it always helps. So being able to support, and I've learned to ask for support now and ask for help. And I think that goes along with just honesty. And you've always been there to do so. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate you coming on and being vulnerable.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And I look forward to, not only watching myself on the podcast, but I look forward to the ones coming down the road, because I learn every day from them. I learn every day.
Well, thank you for coming on.
It is my pleasure.
I love you.
I love you.
So I hope everyone enjoyed that segment. I'm going to pass the baton to Andy. What'd you think?
Well, listen, and I've never met your mom, but I feel like I know your mom, right? I feel like I feel like I heard my mother in her a lot, right? The love and the compassion and the worry, right? You can almost feel, it's almost tangible how worried she is for her son, right? And the thing that I kept thinking about is your mom almost is because of the experience with her husband, your dad, she kind of had a little bit of hey, how do I deal with this, right? Dan needs to surrender on his own. She kind of said that a couple times where hey, this has to be your decision, right? And I can't imagine, right, how difficult it is for a loved one to watch and step back and say, hey, you got to figure this out. But again, to hear how proud she is of you and how well you've done and just how much she loves you, you could just feel that through that conversation. Again, it's beautiful, and it's why recovery is so amazing. And a lot of times when you're talking to somebody and they're thinking about getting sober or getting help, and when you describe it to somebody, it's like describing what a rose smells like to somebody that's never seen or smelt a rose. It's impossible to describe, right? But then when you get on the other side, you're like, oh, I get it. So to see your mom and to see you in that conversation, I think was awesome. And also to hear her clarification on a couple things, hey, what the hospital was like and what she was feeling. Again, it's just that, it's that spotlight into that journey, which again is shout out Mama Brody for coming on and being that open with us.
Yeah. Before I get into Keith's thoughts, because I want to ask him his opinion, it was interesting. I was, sitting there and I knew a lot of it, because I was, made my amends to my mom, and she opened up and I went through family therapy. But I thought the most interesting part of it was how similar her journey was to mine in the instance of, and I kind of talked about this in the intro, was she had to, for family therapy to work, and she, I was so happy that she had good things to say about APN's family therapy, because it wasn't like I wrote her a script to do that. It was like, I told her you could say whatever you want about anything, you just be honest. And it was so similar to my journey in getting help. She was like, I needed to talk to someone, and in this case was Lori. Shout out Lori. But
shout out Lori. Oh, the best.
Was the goat, was for her to talk to someone that has true experience in something similar that she went through. And when I relate it back to me, it's like, for me to finally surrender and be willing, I needed to find someone that I could relate to that went through that journey too. And I was just like, okay, you know what? Him and I seem similar, or blah, blah, blah. If he could do it, I could do it. I'm going to shut up and listen to him because my way's got me here. And I think my mom had a similar journey, and it was like, and that was like the light bulb for me. Like, even though I kind of knew it, but cemented it, like I mentioned earlier, was how hard it was for her. Like, I understood how selfish I was, but like when it's your kid or your parent, they lie to you, blah, blah, blah. Like, I didn't think it was like that hard. And like, it was just like, knowing how hard it was for me, that was just like, wow, it's just as hard for them. And like, just as hard for a mom to let go of control. But yeah, Keith, what do you think?
So it's interesting that you just said that. My two major takeaways from hearing your mom are owning two different things. The first that I thought was really important that she owned, and I'm really grateful that she talked about, is and that you've talked about, is finding the right therapist for you, finding the right place for you, and how important that is. You have to find the person that has that shared, for a lot of people, find that person that has that shared experience, and that way it will work for you so that you can connect with them. And you've talked about that with your experience with Dustin as well. So I thought that was really cool and interesting for both of you to own from the same family. So I appreciate that, because I think our listeners, there's probably some struggle with finding the right therapist, but the value of finding the right therapist. So I thought that was very cool.
Well, go ahead. Sorry, Keith. No, you go. Finish.
Well, the other thing I thought was really powerful and important was your mom owning the fact that she was so angry at you in the hospital, and owning that she walked away, and owning that that's a huge turning point in your life. Certainly in your episode, you talk about that moment, waking up alone and being like, I fucked up. And to hear that she made, owned that anger, made that choice, and didn't realize that maybe that was as impactful as it was. But I mean, any family member or friend has that anger. And I think there's probably a lot of shame attached to feeling angry, especially when you know, whether it's a choice or not, that their loved one is struggling. So it was, I think, really powerful for her to talk about and own that she was angry at you like that. And I think it will help a lot of people take weight off their shoulders, because they're angry at their loved one because they're struggling and they can't do anything to help. So thank you, Mama Brody, for sharing, because I think it goes an incredibly long way. And it was, really powerful to hear from you. So from me to you, thank you.
And she said she was responsible for some new clicks and subscribes.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to talk about too was the concept of, like, it's a parallel process, right? Like, a lot of times, like, if the identified client or patient goes to treatment, the family's like, well, hey, go work on yourself, go fix everything, right? But that person needs to do some work too. And I remember my dad saying, like, what do you mean I have to go to Al-Anon because my son's an idiot? And like, and my mom's like, well, no, honey, you got to work, we got to do this. And my dad was like, sorry, my mom went on that journey. Right. But the concept is like, hey, there has to be a surrender. And your mom talked about that. Right. Then it has to be like this decision to work on, like, hey, who do this lady, Lori, seems like, and she's able to, like, work on herself and work on, letting go of control of the, of situations that we can't control. Right. And then, and continuing that process, and, like, to see how, hey, Dan's the client, right? But mom, hey, like, how many loved ones don't do work on themselves, right? So the fact that she was able to, like, hey, jump in with 2 feet and say, hey, I need to work on some stuff too, to so the whole system can get healthier. Again, is the willingness. We talk about surrender and willingness, and same thing from your mom. So again, kudos to her, right? Because she could have taken the approach of my dad. Hey, what do I have to do? Because my son's an idiot, right? But like that, it's not easy to say, hey, I need to keep working on myself and keep working on being a mom and how to do this for Dan and for me. So I loved it. Super powerful.
Yeah. I didn't, and to like kind of wrap things up on this piece, like to give you like some feedback from my seat, I didn't know how I was going to feel after. I didn't know if I wanted this level of my relationship out there in that public. Two, like I know my mom, and I didn't want her, like if I was going to do it, I wanted her to be authentic and honest and not hold back. And I didn't know if like I was ready to like hear that publicly. And like obviously we have a great relationship now, but like I didn't know if there were things I didn't know. Like she did mention the thing I didn't know. So it was like a little nerve-wracking for me, but I do believe that conversation, and I'm so appreciative that I did it, made us even stronger. And I think communication is key. And I think, Keith, to your point, her being angry at me is okay. Mm-hmm. She doesn't hate me. She's not throwing me to the ground. Like, people are allowed to get angry. And if they get angry, they can, as long as they communicate it properly, that's okay. And like, there's no reason why, like I was angry at a lot of my family for telling me to get sober. Right. And I was a lot more selfish about it, but like she had every right to be angry with me. Like there was time and time again where she, I was letting her down and, it's okay to do that. And I think it makes the family stronger to be able to communicate those things and explain why she felt that way, which she did. So, the last thing I'll say is, and I'll say this to like my mom directly, is like, Mom, like I wouldn't be sitting here today as happy as I am without you. So I love you and I appreciate you doing that. Yeah. But yeah, so moving to the next segment, while I was home, and I would have loved to get my brother involved too. He just wasn't there. But
a little camera shy?
No, he had some, his son wasn't feeling well, so he wasn't involved. He wasn't at our house, but, I had the opportunity for my sister to join the pod and talk to her, ask her similar questions that I asked my mom, but instead of like from a mom to son, conversation or point of view, it's like siblings, older brother to younger sister. I mean, we're only 3 years apart, 2 grades apart. So I kind of grew up with her. But to get her point of view. And I think similar to what my mom said, and I'm sure to a lot of other families, siblings get angry at other siblings when they keep fucking up, right? Or keep doing this. And I think in my sister's, you could see her level of frustration, and you guys will listen and hear, but like, there's like a whole different aspect to frustration and anger.
Well, I'm curious, like, to see, right? Because I know my relationship with my older brother was like we were best friends, right? So, is it? Were you close with your sister at some point, or were you like, hey, like talk a couple times, like a month, or how, like what was that like?
My sister and I, we were 2 grades apart, so we spent 2 grades in high school together, small high school, 2 grades in college together. And then like eventually both lived in New York. We were very close. She knew a lot. Yeah. She knew a lot about my life on the outside. I don't think like I was able to hide a lot of things about my addiction for a long time before she caught on. But I didn't, like we were very close and I trust her. Like I trust my brother. And, they were both equal, like my mom, like and my dad, like they were both big supporters of me getting sober. But as you'll hear in the episode, my sister had life-changing events of her own happening. And so like, I'm eager for you guys to hear that and get her perspective. So stay tuned. I'm excited to kind of get Andy's opinion and Keith's opinion afterwards. Welcome back to part 2 of our family series. I'm joined by my sister, Perry.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
As we discussed before, this episode is going to be geared towards what your experience was like through my journey. I had the opportunity to chat with Mom, and as I explained to her, I think the message that family members or significant others provide is just as powerful as mine, because although it's kind of like the same journey, we both had different paths of getting there, and we both have different experiences. Yours wasn't necessarily an active addiction, but you were just as part of it as I was. So, I have a few questions for you, and I would appreciate just, if you want to be honest and as vulnerable as you want.
You got it. Sounds like a plan.
So I guess, what was your experience like as my sister, knowing that I was struggling with substance abuse and alcoholism?
It's a tough spot to be in because on one hand, you can sense that the other person is not themselves, and you know they're struggling or going through something, and you want to be protective of them, and so you want to almost tell yourself it's not really happening and defend them publicly or to other family members or their friends or whomever and be like, no, I think it's fine, or make excuses for them because out of just protection you want to do that. On the other hand, because you want what's best for them and you want them to be healthy, you also want to figure out a way to help them get out of it, and you don't have all the answers, but you want to just throw yourself in and get really involved, but you don't want to get too involved because I don't have all the answers, and it was a difficult spot to be in. So it was day by day, it was very tricky and very uncomfortable. And then at other times I wanted to be really selfish and close my eyes and just not deal with it.
Yeah, it's interesting looking back on what took place and that journey. And I think for me, if I could kind of put myself in that position, where I was, I looked at it as I didn't want help. I didn't need your help. And I looked at it from a very selfish perspective. In the sense of, I always thought I'm putting the pills in my mouth. I'm doing it to my body. You're saying all these things are so bad. I'm harming myself. I'm not harming you. Stay out of this. If I want to change, I'll change. But I don't need help because I'm making the decision to do it. And looking back on it, right? And I think it was definitely vocalized during it. But what I noticed was I didn't want to hear how much it affected you or other family members or anyone, and I just didn't believe it. I was so lopsided in terms of I'm doing this to my body, it's not doing anything to your body. And then when you take a step back and I had the opportunity to do so and look at some of the decisions I made, it's I never thought about it. God forbid I were to overdose and die, they had to live with a brother that passed away. Right. But I didn't think about that. So it was very selfish of me to not listen to the support. But I always remembered that, where it was you guys aren't it's not affecting you. It's only affecting me. So I could only imagine how difficult it was to be trying to help someone that was so selfish and narrow minded.
Yeah. I think I was able to emotionally and mentally cut through your selfishness. I didn't take that personally because I unfortunately and fortunately understand, I think to an extent, addictive personalities. So I wasn't that's not what kept me up at night, was the fact that you kept coming back with selfish lines, and I didn't feel it was I was just ignored that. I think it started as just be fear, to your point of God forbid you not being here one day. But also then when it got to your worst point, I had a baby at that point, and it became a different concern now because I started getting angry with your selfishness, because I was I have a kid around who can get harmed by you accidentally dropping a pill on the floor, or God forbid setting the house on fire because you're just not in a sober mindset, or whatever, to 10 other things. And so then it became anger and resentment, whereas it started as fear and worry. But I never was like offended by her selfishness, although I can understand from your perspective by looking back, that's what resonates with you.
So I guess the next question of mine would be, when I finally did surrender and get the help I needed, what was it for? Like, how did you feel when those things happened?
Extremely relieved and just like almost at peace, but at the same time equally scared, because I was like, you have to want it, and I can't force you to want it. It seems like you want it. I hope you want it, and I hope it sticks, and like just like praying that it would, so that for your own health and happiness you would find what it is that you needed to get to a sober place. So it was equal relief and fear.
No, it's interesting you say that. And I think that for me, when I think about it, I categorize it as like a different mindset. I was finally willing to like surrender, and I was finally willing to like ask for help and be at least open to like other people's ideas and what they thought, their thoughts, because like my thoughts got me to where I was. And so when I think about like the surrendering piece, and like Mom talked about like the control, like her big piece was she like leading up to my surrender, she felt like she could have control and try to be involved in getting me sober. Mm-hmm. And obviously, as all the support she could do was awesome, but I had to want it. And I guess I'm kind of curious on like, did you have any frustration or anxiety about like wanting to control my situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a controlling person too. So like, I definitely like, if I have problems around me, like want to check boxes and like have an element of control. But like, again, like I had it after it got like toward the end, like I just kind of kept taking I would tell myself like, I have enough going on and I need to like allow myself to step out of the picture. And like, I have like not regrets, but like that at times made me feel guilty, but I didn't feel like it was like my survival mode. And so I think that as controlling of a person as I can be, I kind of was like, okay, let other people control this, because I just can't. I mentally can't and I physically can't. So that, I don't remember that being an issue for me personally, but I understand why it was for Mom. And like, I used to say to you, like, my anger toward you at the time also was like, you might be the one putting the pills in your body, but like you're causing such drama and emotional difficulty and challenges in our family right now. And like, how do you not see that? And like, how do you not like I can't even have like a conversation with my mom anymore because she's like mentally not here. And so that like, it wasn't a controlling thing. That was just like my where I was emotionally.
I think back to, I try to put myself in other people's shoes, and it's not like the best attribute of mine, but I remember when Dad was getting sober, and like I recall like what happened, why he needed to get sober, and like certain things, and I acknowledged it, and I was like, okay, like you do you, like I'm just starting my path of getting fucked up, whatever. But I never was involved in it, but I also didn't have an opinion. And I guess like my question to you is like, how did you handle like that level of resentment? Because you, on one hand, like it was very easy for you to like say, Dan's getting fucked up. Like I have my own kid, I have a husband, I have a career. I don't need this in my life, right? So like, I'm going to take a step back and focus on this. But at the end of the day, you also had a brother that you loved too. So it was like, to me, it's like an interesting balancing act, because like, again, before you answer, like with Dad, like I knew he always had Mom's support. So I feel like for whatever reason, like I felt like my opinion didn't matter. And looking back on it, it probably did. But like I was like so checked out, I was just like, whatever. But I could like, what was that balancing act like for you?
It was hard. It was like the days that I was able to block it out, I was able to just like, okay, like it didn't exist those days. But the days where you came up for whatever reason, or like I got a phone call from somebody or whatever it is, and it was like present again, like it was just very stressful. Like it caused a lot of anxiety and a lot of just worry and fear and just thinking obviously about the worst. For me, I was a couple years younger than you with Dad, and I was embarrassed. Like I don't think that we were educated enough, obviously, and I don't think any of us were. So like there's no one's fault there, but like I didn't know. I was young. B, like I had no education about it, so I was like embarrassed. Like I remember one of my like biggest regrets for Dad's experience is I think one time he asked us to go to a meeting with him, and I said no because I was embarrassed and I was like didn't understand what it meant, and like I look back and think that's super like selfish. But I was 13. Like I forgive myself for being selfish, but like I think I wasn't, and for you, I was not embarrassed at all about what was going on. Whether once you decided to get sober, I wasn't embarrassed, but I even wasn't embarrassed when you were getting fucked up. I just had a like really bad anxiety about it. And so if I did, on the days that I did block it out, I at least was able to like not get rid of the anxiety, but like compartmentalize the anxiety. And I think that like Rob also, just like for those who don't know, it's my husband. I leaned on him a lot emotionally, which he was extremely helpful. And like, because you guys are so close, like he does feel like you're a brother to him. And so he took on a lot of emotional burden for me. So that honestly is the answer, I think, is like, he just like bared a lot of it. And like, he would do the outreach too if I needed him to. And like, I felt like that was enough. I was like, I'm keeping a distance, but I know someone's checking in.
And I think that's like at the bare bones is like, from my perspective, is the most important piece to it, because from someone who is very like, I can, whether it be like I'm sober now or not, like one of like a flaw of mine is like I could check out very easily. Like, oh, like not my kid, not my problem, as my mom would say. But it's like certain things where it's like, wipe my hands and go to sleep, and like yes, like there's a care for it, but like it doesn't live in my brain. But like I commend a lot, and I think it's very easy, especially with the stigma of like drug addiction or alcoholism. Like if you have a family member that's going through it, it's very easy for you to like wipe your hands with it and not be there because of the stigma of being embarrassed. Like I'd rather not talk about it, I'd rather not be there, let them go through this battle. And I think in my experience, like my family didn't do that. They were going through a lot of things and frustrated with me, and there was fear involved, and there's a lot of things that could have caused them to say like, go figure it out, like we're gonna go to sleep and hope you're there tomorrow. But like it didn't. So like looking back on it and hearing other people's stories, like it's funny because when I share in the rooms, like I had to get comfortable in sharing that like I come from a comfortable background and I have a supporting family, because half the stories you hear in like the rooms, they don't have that. So like that was like, it wasn't like my drug addiction, it wasn't like what I was doing, it was more along the lines of like what I come from. And like I don't get embarrassed, I just get a little like, I get anxious about sharing that piece because I know I
feel like you were privileged because of it.
Yeah, privilege, or I just like feel guilty. There's guilt associated with, because like I had these things that other people didn't have.
Yeah, but I think that can go with any element of life, you know what I mean, in general. I think we all can feel guilty about privileges or luxuries or things that we have that others don't. But I think it's also like what you do with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this is like an example of you paying that forward, right? Like you got to a place where you got for your resources, your tools, the things available to you. And so now you're trying to pay that forward. I think you have to just try to fight through that guilt, because I think the fact that you have a loving, caring family who just like relentlessly wanted you to be okay is just like the luck of the situation.
So in like 2 days or 3 days, I'll have 18 months sober. So I guess like my question to you would be, what is it like for you to have seen me in this journey over the last 18 months?
Unbelievably proud and just so happy that you have found an inner peace and a purpose, and you just have like evolved as a person. I think that you are less on edge, like less I don't want to say less stress. We all have stress, but like I think you have a different outlook on life. And I think you take it day by day. And I think that you're able to like be more vulnerable and open yourself up to situations, but also be honest with your boundaries, and not let, like, if anyone crosses your boundaries, I don't think that it like bothers you to the extent that it makes you mad or angry. You just are able to like remove yourself in a polite, kind way and just, your limits. And you're able to practice that every day. So I'm extremely proud of you. It makes me feel, of course, relief selfishly, but just like I know that you're on your journey and doing your best every day, which is all anyone could ask of you or anybody else.
Appreciate that. So talking about like family dynamic, how would you describe our family dynamic, during like active addiction, or during while I was in active addiction, and what it's like today?
Just like difficult. It's everyone has their own emotional investment in the situation, and everyone handles that emotional investment differently. And so again, like I said at the time, like a lot of my anger around you was like I had a new baby and I wanted my mom to be like with me 24/7 and emotionally invested in me, which was really selfish looking back. And like she was extremely helpful toward me, but like you could tell like part of her was missing. And so like it was difficult for me to be in that situation, again, selfishly, but that's just how I felt at the time. And I just remember having those conversations with Rob, like just being like, this is so super frustrating because it's like no one's home. You know what I mean? And so I think it created just tension in our family dynamic. And I think it just created like, just there wasn't a lot of, there was like happy moments, but it wasn't like, it was like more far and few between than what we're used to. A lot less laughs going on. And it was because like anytime you wanted to laugh or anytime you wanted to be happy about something, like, of course you're going to remember that there's like a big issue going on. And I think that now, because of what you've gone through, like, I think that like you have had really great people around you who've educated you, and therefore you've educated a lot of us. And we did some therapy during the beginning of your recovery. And I think like we all got educated and got a different perspective on like how to support you. And I think that those tools have remained in place. So I think it's helped our dynamic, especially because you're sober and we're all happy and able to enjoy you sober. But like we all can think about the tools and the practices that we were taught to have a healthy family dynamic.
Yeah, so that was going to be like my next question. While I was at APN, we all engaged in family therapy. And I guess I was kind of curious, what was your experience like, working with the APN family service team?
I honestly thought that they were amazing. I obviously could see the experience you were having on the situations where I wasn't involved, but even more so where in the therapy where I could see like the how they structure their programming and how they think about, their clients' recovery and how invested they are in it and how they help educate and bring in other family members to help make them successful. I think I like hugely commend them for that. And I think that it just helped us in like very simple terms. Like, cause we, although have been through this, like, I think that like you just don't know, you never know how to, like, what's the right way and what's the right thing to say and how to handle it. And I just feel like we all got the right messaging and just toolkit. Like you want a toolkit in these situations. You want someone to be like, here's how I recommend you handle this situation, that situation.
Yeah. I think about, like, that was a very like broad answer, and I think I commit, right? You were like, and I get it, but it's like for me, I know like I like to be like super dumbed down. It's like, hey, like, damn, when you're in this situation, like, do this, or like based off, I was in the exact same position as you, and this is what's helped me. And whether you want to take it or take a piece of it, I just felt that like Mom mentioned like Lori working with her, and like I saw a dramatic change with Mom because Lori said to her directly, I'm from New Jersey and I have a daughter that's in recovery now. I've been through very similar things and here's what's helped me. And then like there was an instant connection. It wasn't like, well, based off of this book and this and this. Like she and you use the word, I think that she was very vested in our family's success.
Yes.
And I think that, and I also respect Lori too, is like it was like an equal playing ground. It wasn't like our family outside of me had the opportunity to just like dump on me. It was like very equal, and I thought like she played like a very good medium in it.
100%.
So I guess now that we've had, I guess like 10 or 11 episodes thus far, I guess what's your experience like of me doing this podcast, whether it was like my episode about my story or and in general?
I touched on it before. Like, I think this is an amazing thing for you as a vulnerable outlet, because you're not someone like historically who's been vulnerable. So I think like that is an amazing thing for your own journey in recovery. But also I think that doing this helps pay it forward and hopefully will help even just one person and inspire them or get them into recovery or whatever is gonna like touch somebody and help them think a little bit differently. And I think like anything like this, you just never know. So like this is a time commitment for you and your colleagues, and I think that it just speaks volumes to how important this is to you. And I love that you can take a huge part of your life and put it out there for people.
Was there, in my episode, was there anything that like you heard that you didn't know?
I feel like there was things that you said that like I probably knew, and if I really like sat down and thought about it in like the back of my head or in like back of my mind, I was like, yeah, like I probably knew that at the time and didn't want to believe it. Like I can't think of a specific example. I was shocked, but it was like more so just like laying it out on the table, or I was like, wow, like it was cumulatively like a lot to digest because it was so truthful and honest. That whereas like it felt like dribs and drabs before.
And so someone that's not in recovery, you have a pretty good experience of individuals in your immediate family that does that are in recovery. Dad, Greg, me. So I guess like a big piece of, again, why we're doing this is I think a lot of people are in your position where they either have a father or a sibling that could be struggling like an active addiction, or could be like trying to find like a way to like help their loved one in recovery. And so like my question to you is like, what advice do you have for them, whether it be another daughter or another brother or another daughter or a sister that, you know, has gone through this journey yourself? Like, what would you say to them, that someone who's like struggling in your same position?
Probably just like do your best not to be offended or take things personally that you would take like in any other situation would be like clearly offensive or clearly like not a nice thing to do or say or impact you. Like it's you have to be able to like say to yourself over and over again, like there's someone else, like this is somebody else. This is not the brother that you know, or like this, and this is not like about you. I think like that's the main message. Like this has nothing to do with you. It's not about you. So I think for me, I at times it was hard and I had to remind myself of it, but I think my most successful moments to be able to get through it emotionally was being able to say like, this is not personal. Like it has nothing to do with anything I've done and they're not doing it on purpose. But also like try to be not as selfish, like me, like try not to have selfish thoughts when you can't. Like like whether it was having mom's time and attention when she was so worried about you, like, or like an example I gave about dad, like not wanting to go to the meeting because I was embarrassed. Like that was so selfish and I should have been like, they're struggling and like I need to give 100% of myself to the best of my ability to be able to support them through their journey.
Yeah, I think appreciate that. And I think it's like a very good answer, because I think it's like a balancing act of what level of support can you provide someone that you're not overwhelming them to cause them to push you away. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, a way that you can communicate to them that could get through to them. And I think me being majority on one side where like, I push people away because I didn't want to hear it. It's very hard to like, because when people throw things down your throat, you don't like, it's almost like the instant like snap of the fingers, like whatever you're telling me, I'm just going to do the opposite because you're annoying me and like you're pissing me off, and like I'm just doing it out of spite now. And then it's like, and you're also not in the right state of mind, but and so it's like, it's a unique balancing act because you want to be there to support, but you don't want to push them away too. So no, I give you credit, and like, listen, like you were a huge part, and you remain to be a huge part of my recovery. And so it's like, yes, I think in the level of active addiction, like I was extremely selfish, and you said it best. I think that's not who I was. And I think that was very hard and it still is very hard to look back and not have guilt towards my actions. Like I still do. And I think it's been easier since I went through like the step work and been able to relieve a few things, and people have like almost said like they validated a lot of the things and said, oh, it's okay. Like I get it. But there's certain people that haven't done that with, and it gets like, for me, it's like I still have guilt there. And so I think it's like, it is like an out of body experience, but it would go without saying that like you were a huge part and still are a huge part of my recovery.
I appreciate that. And you're, of course, someone I always looked up to and continue to look up to. And that didn't change when you weren't sober, but it made it harder. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I was like, I knew the person that you are capable of being and want to be, right? Like I knew even when you were getting fucked up that like you could sense that you still wanted to be a better person. And so I never looked down upon you, not once.
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you for joining.
All right, well, welcome back. That was awesome hearing from Dan's sister, Perry. Shout out Perry and Mama Brody for doing this. And again, like, you know, it's not easy to talk about like such real and vulnerable and like, you know, authentic topics. So again, like, shout out to them. The thing that really resonated with me there was there was a couple things, but the first one was the fact of like, you know, your whole life you're waiting to be a mom. She's waiting to be a mom, right? And she's waiting to have that relationship with her mom. Hey, grandma, mom, and the kid, and how your mom wasn't present in that aspect of her life because of, you know, her older brother's actions and his addiction, kind of just robbing that situation, and to feel angry and be selfish about it, but still in a normal, good way, and to be able to express that to you, I thought was again authentic and real. And again, it's that cliche of like, hey, this only affects me. Well, no, it doesn't, right? You know, it's like throwing a rock into a pond, and there's the ripples, and that's what our addiction is, just this ripple effect. And so to hear her talk about that again is very eye opening and raw. The other thing I really liked that she said was she's talking about the family therapy and the structure of it, and needing to dive into that, and leaning on her husband, and
I love
You
it.
can call him Rob.
Shout out Rob too. You know,
and I just again, like, the whole thing is awesome, and it for me it strikes a, you know, like, again, I don't have a sister, but I have a brother, and mom, but it just brings it feels real for me, that somebody that went through similar but different situations. So again, the fact that she came on, and again, she's a younger sister, so she could have ripped you. She could have, nah, Dan, everything. And I thought she was great with you, and kind of told you where she thought you were a knucklehead, but she loves you, and you could see that too. And it was pretty powerful. Keith, what did you think, Keith?
I think it's fascinating and incredibly unique take, especially having heard from you about your own story, your mom about your story, and now to hear from your sister's point of view, her story, and not knowing what she was going through at the time. A huge amount of gratitude to the Brody family as a whole just for agreeing to do this, because it's amazing to have you all be honest like this. And, you know, the anger that your mom had at you is totally different than any anger or worry your sister had at you for you, because she was going through pregnancy and having a child. And that's fascinating. And the stuff that she brought up, is stuff that all loved ones or families of loved ones must feel when your person is dealing with addiction, which is, can I trust this person around that child? Is my child safe around that person? And so I really appreciate her coming on the pod and owning that level of, skepticism or worry, because it'll translate to our listeners who deal with the same thing. I'm most curious, Dan, what was it like to talk to your sister honestly and openly, certainly in a public space, about this?
Yeah, I think, this is something that is very challenging for me to do when I share in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, is that I come from a very loving, supportive family, because I don't feel ashamed about it, but I feel guilt about it because there's so many others in that room that don't have that. So I feel like guilty. But I'm also so lucky and grateful to have such a loving family. My dad, my mom, my sister, my brother, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, for all supporting me through this journey. And to, take a deeper dive into this specific conversation with my sister, I think when I'd made my amends to my sister, and even in active addiction, she had brought up some of these things. And it's funny, like, I was just like, I remember like distinctly being like, how selfish are you? Telling me that, like, you're a mom, figure it out, or like something like that, like so ridiculous. But in rehaving that conversation with her, and even like her admitting her faults, right? Where like almost wanted to stop her and say like, hey, like, you didn't do anything wrong, but her taking accountability when she didn't have to, and being very like brutally honest with me. And I appreciated that. Yes, it was like definitely difficult, but it was very appreciative. And I think that in a lot of family dynamics, whether it be a sibling or that exact thing where you have a sibling that is having a child, then taking away the relationship between them, or any other things. There's so many different hurdles or challenges that these families take and cause a lot of resentments and frustration and anger. And I think, like, again, my sister was able to, like, fortunately, she has a very loving husband that she depended on, like she mentioned, about like for her like emotional support, which was amazing. But like, again, I think she was very real. And I think similar to my mom, she had her own struggles, right? This was this was another, looking back, we talked about, she now has, similar to my mom, she has a father and two brothers in recovery that have gone through this journey. And I don't know if you guys remember, but like she talked about the stigma of being embarrassed of like my dad's journey. And she was young, right? Like you can't blame her. She was, if I was like 16, she was like 12 or 13 at the time.
And she had you as a brother. So like she has a lot of latitude.
And so and how her mindset has shifted, right? And we always talk about the stigma that's out there today. And, my sister could have gone two ways with it, right? She could have been embarrassed or this, or she could have, been there and supporting it. And like, there's no bigger fan than her and my mom are cheerleaders for like the three men in her life, or 3 out of 4 men in her life that have gone through this. So, I give them both a tremendous amount of credit. I'm very grateful to have my sister as my sister and my brother as my brother. They've both been there for me. And like, I appreciate my sister just being very real and honest. And I think it's funny because I had this conversation with my brother and sister separately, but, in making my amends to them, they were so excited for me to build a sober and honest relationship with their children. And I think that was a big change in trust I needed to earn back with my sister because of, unfortunately, Blake was alive when I was still, my niece, my sister's daughter was, she was still alive, but just born when I was using. So I can't, I was using, a part of her life like for whatever. But, you know, it's like now I have the opportunity to build that trust with both of them where I could take Blake or Ryder to get coffee or get breakfast without my sister worried about my driving or what I'm going to do or my mindset. And there's no second thought. And it goes back to the communication and the family therapy aspect and just, you know, taking action, not moving my mouth and saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. I'm just showing them that like where I'm at today versus where I was at almost 2 years ago.
Yeah. Like we call that, right. Under promise, over deliver. Right. And, the other thing about restitution and amends is that it allows you, like you spoke about, to be a brother and to be an uncle, and like to cherish that and to kill that. You know what I mean? In a great way, right? And just that's like I can be there and I can spoil my nephews and my nieces, and when my brother or sister call, I can answer the phone, and it's not like. It's like, hey, how can I help? Or what's going on? You know what I mean? And that's again, restitution and amends in the process is huge because it builds those relationships back. And the other thing that, like, a part of amends is direct and indirect and living amends and all this stuff. But, like, giving mom and sister an opportunity to kind of, hey, what do you need to say to me? Like an opportunity to vent almost, right? Is, again, cathartic. You know what I mean? And, like, listen, if it was like, Dan, this, like at some point you got to set the boundary, but it's also, hey, like, what, you know, is there anything I said or is anything I didn't know that I did that affected you? And to give them the chance to kind of speak like on a one-on-one basis. And then and then have them be able to come on the pod and express it even deeper, I think is just going to do wonderful things for your relationship with both of them. And they're both, you know, again, angels for dealing with you, and shout out to both of them. And, we were definitely lucky to have him on.
Yeah. And I think to like kind of wrap up, I think what's unique about this episode is, and we kind of talked about it earlier, but there are so many people that have similar scenarios where like a sibling, and/or, have like a child in this level of like active addiction or struggling with mental health, and they're unsure what to do, or they don't feel like anyone is relatable. Right? No one's in my position. Similar to what we thought. Like, no one's like me. No one gets it.
No one's as bad as me. Yeah.
And so to give them a spotlight to talk about and to let everyone know that, like, hey, I've had, you know, I like for my mom, like, you know, a husband, 2 sons, my brother, my sister, 2 brothers, a father that are in this journey, and it's okay. And there are solutions, and there's plenty of help to get there. And like, you don't have to do this alone, and to share their experience, I think helps others. And I know people at APN, we do a great job with family services. And I think some people are hesitant to, like, whether it be siblings or not, to rebuild the relationships, but it does get better. You just need to ask for help and see that, you know, there are people out there that can provide that support.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
think, you know, hopefully everyone found, you know, my Jewish mother relatable and my sister relatable as well. But I think they did an amazing job, and sincere thank you to the both of them. So yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed this kind of special episode. We look forward to doing a lot more of these down the pipe and in the next season, and some of our alumni.
And again, just a huge shout out and amount of gratitude for the Brody family and for Dan. This was tough, and I don't think you knew this was coming when we started this podcast, but I appreciate your openness, your family's openness, and the level of bravery it took to make this episode. So thank you, Brodies, all the way across, and Dan in particular.
My pleasure.
All right, Dan, you want to lead us out here? You want to close it out?
So I appreciate everyone listening. It means a lot to all of us here. If you have any questions for us or want to reach out to us for any reason, please reach out to us at pod@apn.com, or you could DM our social accounts. If you want to see some of our other episodes, if you just watch this one, you want to link back to kind of my story to bring it full circle, visit us at apn.com/podcasts. That's apn.com/podcast. Not only does it have mine, but it has Andy's and many other of our alumni. Thank you, and have a happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Andy, you want to say happy holidays?
So you guys were great. I didn't think it was nothing.
You did great, Andy.
Happy holidays. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Happy Kwanzaa. Everything.